Hey peeps, welcome to another video. Today it's the start of my Stranger Things adventure. So I have a love-hate relationship with Stranger Things. I don't do well with scary at all, and I remember watching the first Stranger Things season and falling in love with it, but then also the Demogorgons, and having to walk between my office in the old house and my apartment in the back garden at night was just like one of those things that I have an overactive imagination, and it was just like, yep, every single little movement is a Demogorgon coming to get me. So I now watch Stranger Things during daylight hours and then watch something totally fluffy before I go to bed, or binge watch a whole bunch of YouTube videos, but I still absolutely adore it. I am a little annoyed with them for splitting it up the way that they have, that the finale is not coming out until Friday, I think it is, but it's also worked out quite well because I have this fabric in my stash, and it is the Artistic Vibrance Viscose Lawn from Lady McElroy. I have the Shelby dress, which I did a test piece for last year, and whilst I didn't like the test piece because of print placement and I fluffed up on putting the buttonholes, I did really love the dress. So I'm going to smoosh these two together for a very kind of late 80s, early 90s look. I know Stranger Things is in 1986, I think it is. This is a viscose challis from Lady McElroy, like I say. My only worry is that it is sort of semi-sheer, but I don't have any lining fabric. I have absolutely zero lining fabric. I need to order myself another. I ordered 10 meters last time from the fabric room. I think I need to order myself 20 meters given the amount of stuff that I make, and I'm aware that the amount of stuff I make is excessive, but it's also my job. So I like clothes, and I have all this fabric, so if I don't make this into clothes, then this is just sitting there being insulation, and it's too pretty to be insulation. I don't have any lining for this, but I do the majority of the time wear a full slip under. I've got one on today, and it is again just one of those things that I've kind of gotten into the habit of doing. So I'm going to power ahead and get the Shelby dress, and it's going to be the full length dress. I've got 3-point-something meters of this because I was going to do the romper, and I love the idea of the romper, and it probably would be way more 80s appropriate, but I also really dislike having to use the bathroom when you have a romper on. It's all fun and games until nature calls, and then it's just like there's a cartoon. Yeah, basically this. I'm gonna get this ironed. As I say, traced this out, made up a muslin last year, really like the fit, just need to make it in a fabric I like. So get the pattern ironed, get the fabric ironed, get it cut out, and then start sewing in time for Friday's reveal, because I'm going to make a 80s inspired dress to watch a 80s inspired terrifying TV show's finale, because why wouldn't I? I have completely run out of white bias binding. I've ordered some more, it's on its way, but it's not going to get here in time for me to finish this dress for Friday, and I don't want to cut out the remainder of my fabric, which is there, because I think there is enough of it left to make a hunter tank out of, which I think would look really cool. So I am going to face my facing, which is a technique that I have done a standalone video for up here. Basically what it is you sew the facing pieces together, you sew the interfacing pieces together, you then sew the facing to the interfacing, so the fabric to the interfacing with the right sides together, trim the edge, turn it around, and then press it, and that way you end up with a really nice cleanly finished what would be raw edge, very little bulk, and a beautifully fused facing piece. So that is the first thing that I am going to get done with all of these pattern pieces here. So let's get on. So once you've done all the pressing and trimming, you should end up with something that looks like this. So what would be raw edge of the two facings, the one that's not going to be attached to the neckline of the dress, is nicely finished because the facing has been pressed under, and then we still have the raw edge that's going to get attached to the neckline later to finish that off. So I'm going to put that to the side and start working on the ties. I like to get all the fiddly bits done ahead of time. I've actually cut 4 of these ties rather than 2 because I prefer slightly wider ties. If I was going to be doing the lace up back hack that there is out and looks lovely, then I would have gone for narrower ties, but just because I'm only putting the 2 on, I've made them slightly wider by just cutting 4 instead of cutting 2. I'm not sure which one the pattern suggests because I didn't write it on the pattern piece when I traced it out, so silly me, but yes, 4 for slightly wider ties. sleeve time. I always like to get my sleeves made before my bodice, or in this case full dress, because they are fiddly and they're not my favourite things. I'm fully aware that it takes just as long to make the dress in the order that I do. It's not any quicker, just in my head it feels quicker. I have all my fiddly bits done, so I've got my little sleeves, they are sewn and hemmed. I have my ties and I have my facing faced. So I'm going to need my ties because I'm going to sew this dress completely with French seams. It is princess seamed, so you do the French seam a little bit differently. There is a tutorial for that up here. Basically what you do is just sew it the reverse order. Technically you can sew a French seam in any order that you like, as long as you use the seam allowance that the pattern gives you. This seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch. Usually I sew 1/4 of an inch first, trim, press, and then sew at 3/8 of an inch. But as I mentioned, this is a princess seam. Princess seams need to be able to curve, so I'm going to sew this time round 3/8 of an inch first, trim really close, press, and then sew at 1/4 of an inch to finish off the French seam, which will give me really narrow French seams, which should technically, and have in the past, gone around the corners or the curves really nicely. The other thing to bear in mind when you're doing French seams this way around is if your fabric frays like crazy, only trim the seam when you're ready to press and sew immediately, because the more you manhandle a seam, the more it will fray. As you are sewing the final pass with a very narrow 1/4 of an inch, you can end up with little feathery threads sticking out of the French seam if you're not careful. So if your fabric frays a lot, make sure to trim and press and sew each seam individually, which is not my usual method, but it will help if your fabric particularly frays. But the first thing I need to do is sew the ties onto the back panel in their correct position so that they can be incorporated into the French seam. I think you would call this French seam tagliatelle because it's definitely thicker than usual, but I have sewn my first round of French seams. The only ones I haven't been able to do are the shoulder seams because they have the princess seam going into them and need to be finished and pressed flat before I can before I can sew the shoulder seams up. So everything's trimmed. I'm going to take it over to sewing machine, press it flat, press it so that the right sides are together, and then I can come back and sew at 1/4 of an inch. Believe it or not, this pile of fabric is almost a dress. I am going to add the buttons, and I have decided to go for the pink shell ones because I think they are very cute. They are a lot smaller than the pattern recommends. Well, actually no, it does say 3/8 of an inch buttons, and these are just about that, so actually exactly what the pattern recommends. So I've marked my buttonhole placement. I am going to get those sewn in, then I'll be able to try it on. Fingers crossed it fits. I love how this dress has turned out. I think it is very 90s in shape. I think if it was 80s it would have stronger shoulders and probably a collar on it, but yeah, so I think it's very 90s in shape. The True Bryce, Shelby, both romper and dress do lean that way, but with this print I think that I wouldn't have been looked at askance if I'd been dropped in the middle of 1986. I absolutely love this print. Somebody said, I knew it reminded me of Saved by the Bell, but I couldn't think why, especially looking at the opening credits for it, but apparently it's Max's Diner, and I think you're right, it's very Saved by the Bell, very much reminiscent of that, which I do think was the 90s as well. But again, I don't think this fabric would have been out of place if I had been dropped in the middle of 1986 Hawkins. Although, well, the Starmore, so 1985 Hawkins, but I really wouldn't want to have been. I watched the whole finale this morning. There was 4 hours, not 2. It was great. It was great. There weren't as many jump scares, or I'm getting braver because I didn't have any kind of like can't look moments, which I have had in some of the previous episodes. So yeah, maybe watching during the day, maybe watching with a purring cat on my lap. I don't know what the secret was, but there weren't as many kind of moments this morning as I thought there were going to be, but I very much enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to season 5, and it's going to be interesting to see how they wrap it all up. That's it, no more spoilers. Hopefully I haven't given any really big spoilers away. So yeah, let me know in the comments down below if you have watched the Stranger Things finale and what you thought of it. So for the True Bryce Shelby dress, as I've mentioned, very 90s in shape, very easy to make. I kind of ignored their recommendation for the amount of wearing ease because this is me, and we all know I prefer a much kind of closer skimming fit. This is meant to have had about 4.5 inches of ease around the bust, and mine has 2. But again, this is my dress for me to wear, and I much prefer this look and fit on me. I have put the waist ties in at the back to give it some shaping, and I do, you know, there is quite a bit of cinching going on back there. I do think that's a really nice detail to have. This is the kind of dress that I'm going to want to wear in really hot weather because again it skims and there's no kind of actual cinching at the waist. And it would also be something that I would love to wear to a barbecue, and with the ties at the back, if you ate a little bit too much you could definitely kind of loosen things from the start of the day if you feel the need. I want to try the lace up back hack that I have seen, and that would just involve making some rouleau loops to sew into the back princess seams at the appropriate height, and then making another long rouleau loop to lace up at the back. As I say, very easy to make. I've made the cap sleeves. I will probably always make the cap sleeves. I prefer these little sleeves to the longer ones. Yeah, I can also see myself perhaps doing this sleeveless. I think that could look quite nice. You would need to bind the edges or line this if you wanted to do that, and it would need to then be fully lined because I mean, you could do a half lining and sort of tack it, you know, finish the hem of the lining and tack it in place at the waist, but I think it would look better with a full lining if you were going to line it. I really like the face the facings trick that Carol let me know about, and I have included a link to that video in the description down below if you want to see in more detail how that goes about. But I think with a fabric that's as sheer as this, if I'd have added bias binding, it would have added bulk, because this is a very thin fabric as well, but it would have added bulk and it would have added another really kind of like defined line around the edge of the facing. I don't mind that this dress is unlined. I will probably, well no, I'm gonna have to always wear this with a slip underneath of it, but that's totally fine. It is just something to bear in mind that with a lighter fabric like this, you might want to think about lining it or investing in a slip, because the fabric really does skim the figure. There's not enough volume of fabric to kind of like hide. If this was a very full kind of gathered skirt, then you would get away with perhaps not lining it, but because this is skimming the figure, you definitely need to line this fabric. When I make this one again, I will probably add a couple of inches to the length so it's fully maxi. I've hemmed this one by turning it up 3/8 of an inch and then 3/8 of an inch again, so I've taken probably, hang on, so that's, I've taken an extra 1/8 of an inch away from the hem allowance, because the hem allowance on this was 5/8 of an inch. I think I would probably add, like I say, maybe 1.5 inches just to make this properly maxi, because at the moment it's kind of like just above the ankle length, which is totally fine, and I will wear this one, but it would be nice to have this fully maxi. I'm not sure that I would like this dress on me if it was shorter. I think the reason that I love this dress as much as I do is because the skirt has as much flare at the bottom as it does. Obviously the shorter you make it, the less flare that there would be. I do like them on other people, but we all know how I feel about wafting around in tons and tons of fabric, so for me I like the longer length. I do, as I mentioned at the beginning as well, love the look of the romper, and I'm not ruling out making it, but again, this cartoon says it all. It's one of those things, it's like, yes, this is fabulous, this is brilliant, and it's all well and good if you're at home, but if you're out in public and you have to go to the bathroom, you do end up in that situation. The romper might happen, and when I say romper I do mean jumpsuit. Romper is the shorts version, isn't it? I mean the longer version. Again, for me, I much prefer the longer version rather than the short version on me, but I've seen them lots of them on other people, and I think they're gorgeous. So yeah, true bias Shelby dress, very 90s, leaning 80s in this fabric, awesome pattern, will make it again, highly recommend. Very easy to follow the sewing instructions, easy to make, and just very nice to wear. I'm over the moon with this dress, very thrilled that I wasn't scared to pieces by the end, the finale of Stranger Things. I hope you guys enjoyed the intro to this. That took far longer to make than it should have done last night, but I definitely needed some distracting, so it was a very good project to do. But yeah, I was very pleased with the outcome. Very pleased with the outcome. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye!